The contents of what I'm about to say in this video is going to be something that triggers you very badly. It's going to be something that goes against everything you've already ever known within your life. So if that sounds a bit too much for you right now, I want you to click off now. And I want to start this off by saying in no means, in no way, shape, or form is this in any way making fun of, humiliating, not taking seriously any of the pain that all of the victims have went through in this case, because the truth of the matter is that regardless of what I'm about to say, and regardless of if you believe me or not, there are many victims. There are many things we have proof of. So none of this is funny, none of this is a joke, none of this is to diminish any of their pain or their suffering. And I truly wish all of the victims and their families a lot of peace in this situation. Now, with this being said, let's get into the truth about Epstein. Now, what you can see from the title of this video is for believers and non-believers alike. And what I mean by that is this is going to be an incredibly spiritually based video. And for those of you watching that are very rational, very scientific people, I'm going to give you some Easter eggs in this video because I'm not going to do everything for you. And quite frankly, a lot of you know that you don't trust or believe anybody when they just start handing things to you. In reality, you like to go research and you like to go find things out for yourself. Therefore, most of what I'm going to be mentioning and a lot of this entire topic, I have already started to break down over on my Patreon months ago. I'll have the article for my Patreon linked in the description if you're interested, and I have a photo up of it now. If you're interested in actually reading very in deep what I have done a lot of research on from a very rational historical point of view, on top of everything I'm going to be addressing spiritually. But again, you can do your own research, you can come to your own conclusions. I'm also going to preface this off by saying everything of what I'm speaking about is from my own spiritual practice. Hi, if you've never seen me before, my name is Bianca. I am a psychic witch. I teach all about deities, demons, angels, everything of the sort, the astral, the other side, mostly anything spiritually related. I've been teaching for a while. If you're interested in content like this, go check out my Patreon. Go check out my website for my lectures that you can download and get my lecture notes and a lot of other things, because I go very in deep in research and as much practical scientific knowledge that you can. I talk a lot about quantum physics within my courses and things like that for those who are watching that are very rational types of people. Now, everybody else watching this, all of the believers, you believe in God, you believe in the universe, you believe in spirit, you believe in something that is a higher power than you. Whatever you choose to believe in, that is your prerogative. A lot of this is extremely spiritually based. As I just gave my disclaimer, I'm a psychic witch. Everything I talk about is very woo-woo. This is going to be a very woo-woo video, getting into everything going on about Epstein, because as many people are already talking about, this is not just a regular human case about human crimes going on. There's quite a bit of people speaking about topics like this, like Candace Owens. If you're curious, go look up Candace and what she's been speaking about in very recent times to get an idea of very rational or politically related people, because the Epstein case is a very political case at the end of the day on worldwide global politics. If you want somebody who's a bit more known for that type of content, speaking about woo-woo things, go check her out. Go see what's going on. A lot of people are talking about this on Reddit, on TikTok. A lot of the conspiracy theorists, in my personal opinion, were not conspiracy theorists. They were pretty much hitting it on the nose. And most of the individuals that are conspiracy theorists, I do believe, have a pretty strong intuition and are probably getting downloads or channels and they don't even know it themselves. And that's where the conspiracy theories are coming from, because I'll get into that later in this video. A lot of the random things that pop into your head, whether you believe it or not, is coming from God, universe, spirit, a higher power other than you, even if that is yourself, even if that is your higher self, right? And so, getting into this, you can research a lot of what I'm about to say, and you can go look it up for yourself. You can look at the files. You can start piecing the puzzle pieces together on your own. I am a high priestess to Lord Lucifer. I believe in free will. I promote free will, freedom of education, freedom of speech on every single level and plane. So you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe anything coming out of my mouth, but if you're here watching and you're here so far and you would like to see what I have to say, we're going to get into some things that are very, very jarring for the normal human mind to understand and come into terms with the concepts I'm about to give you. So buckle up for a very wild ride. I'm not going to get extremely in depth here on YouTube to not get censored for this. And like I said, I have things very written in great detail over my Patreon if you're interested, and I'm having a follow-up post about this topic coming up soon with brand new downloads and information I've recently gotten since the first time I wrote that post and all of my research I did in 2025. So Epstein, Mr. Epstein. We are going to start this off by stating that Epstein was not real. The Epstein that you all know about, the human man born as Jeffrey Epstein, died a very long time ago. And what I mean by that is Epstein was running around for quite some time. We do have photos and videos and interviews of him speaking and interacting with people and doing a whole bunch of things. However, I'm here to break the news to you that that was not actually Epstein, the human Epstein, the original Jeffrey in his soul. That was an ancient deity. That was an old Egyptian god that was basically taking over his body and running around doing things, quote unquote, as Epstein, because he agreed to do that. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, this is too woo, I'm gonna click off, please go ahead and do that. For everybody else wanting to stay, we're gonna get into this ride. Now, if you're sitting there wondering what I'm even talking about, I would like to remind you what's very, very popular in pop culture and entertainment is videos about possession, movies about possession, right? If you know anything a little about me, if you've seen me from TikTok, or if you're coming from my TikTok, where I'm the most popular platform that I'm on, I had an entire stint in series talking very greatly in depth about horror movies, about possession, about demonic entities, because I am like I said, a high priestess to Lord Lucifer. I'm somebody who's a demonologist. I work with demons, the goetic demons, the infernal divine, as I like to officially call them, what they're supposed to be referred to as. Those types of deities, those types of divine beings, I work with them on a daily basis. The real ones that actually help you and are not trying to harm you, not trying to steal your soul. I've written an entire guide going very in depth about the differences between the infernal divine, demonic entities that want to harm you, how possession works, everything of that nature. But going back to why I brought that up, if you can believe that that is an entire movie genre, or if you've ever read somebody's possession story and think that it's somewhat real, you can come to terms with the fact that I just said that was not Jeffrey Epstein, that was a deity in his body. And the more factual part of where this is coming from for me is you all have to sit down and understand what is coming out in the files right now. A lot of people are bringing up the names Baal, Molech, talking about old ancient Mesopotamian deities or demons or a divine being from the other side that wanted child offerings, I'm going to say, instead of the actual word to not get flagged here on YouTube, but they wanted a lot of things that involved what happens when you get hurt, you get a paper cut, what comes out of that, what is going on with why children, specifically children, are being taken and very not nice things are being done to them, very horrific things are being done to them, why that has been a thing since very, very, very ancient civilizations. Everything that is coming out right now in these files, as many people can go fact check and go look up, has happened historically for a very, very long time, very disturbingly so. A lot of these practices are coming from very ancient, old civilizations, ancient Mesopotamia, from Kan, from Sumeria, from Babylon, all of those ancient civilizations that were the top and height of world power back in the old world, back when most of the world's population and wealth and power was concentrated in the Middle Eastern region of the map and most of Northern Africa as well, when you talk about Egypt. Why all of this is not quote unquote new news, why certain things were spoken about in the Bible, why certain prophecies were given. If you're going to go down the very logical rabbit hole of this, there's a lot of things you can go research and look into right now. And the names Baal and Molech, I would like to state for the record and have it here on my page at the very least, as somebody who is a demonologist, the infernal divine beings of Baal and Moloch were not involved in this. They were not running around doing and accepting all of these offerings of children, and I'm saying that very loosely to not get flagged again, and everything that has been ensuing in the Epstein files and what people have been doing for centuries at this point. It was not specifically them, they're just kind of a scapegoat. Because if you would like to go very, very deeply into deity work, the divine, I have an entire lecture called The Creation of Deities that is available through my Patreon if you're interested enough in this topic, where when a civilization falls, and when it is tied very heavily with a religion, once the civilization goes and the people that were inhabiting that civilization go assimilate into other civilizations, or they're absorbed into another kingdom, another territory of sorts, and they're forced to assimilate to a new religion, what happens to those gods that just stopped being prayed to, that people stopped believing in? If you, like I'm saying, if you really would like to know, I go really, really in depth in that whole lecture, but essentially they have to either become absorbed into another religion, or they have to create a new one in a sense, which I will get very, very deeply into another video and a follow-up video to this one, talking about the Abrahamic religions specifically and how that has played out in the world and kind of shaped the world, the new world, the world that we currently live in, if you want to go off of the Christian terms of the old world and the new world. Old Testament and the New Testament, that's all very heavily tied to all of this, because in reality, when you're looking at politics at the current state of the world right now, it's all religiously based if you really start going down that rabbit hole. But if we look at the fall of ancient Mesopotamia and the way how the people inhabiting that region were assimilated into other territories and other countries, other religions, as things have sped up and moved throughout time, we can start to understand that we have deities that were no longer being prayed to, but they still exist. They still exist. And so they find one way, shape, or form to be known, even if that is taking on the name of another deity to do their practices through, or as they become forgotten and they lose power, because power for a god is their worship, is people praying to them, is the offerings and the energy they can harvest and collect, which we'll get very deep into in a second. When you have that happening, the deities, the divine beings that are here on earth that still want to have power in some way, shape, or form, start to look for it in other ways. And how do they do that? They start approaching people, they start having prophets, they start having contact with human beings and start making deals with them. You know, the ancient old tale of, oh, I made a deal with the devil. You've never made a deal with Lucifer the way that you've made a deal with one of these old gods that need somebody to pray to them, that need somebody to believe in them. The devil is never asking you for your soul in exchange for something and making a contract with the devil. However, these old, very old deities, entities, these divine beings, they will ask for your soul, and you can never technically sell off your soul, but what you can do is give exchange of your body, your physical body. You can say, make me powerful, make me rich, make me wealthy, and in exchange I will allow you to inhabit my physical human body and do things down on earth. And that is what Epstein and a great deal of very wealthy people have done. Very many people who are in charge of different governments, powerful businesses, different affairs, the people who run the world, essentially, why are they not being punished? Why are they not behind bars? Because they're not human anymore. They're not human anymore. They're old divine beings, essentially playing out affairs and petty nature through the spiritual realms down here on earth. And if you really want examples and context of this, go look at the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. Why, when there was ever a fight between ancient Greek gods, that's also showcased and paralleled with what was actually going on in ancient Greece at the time. This is not a new concept. You can, like I said, you can choose to believe this or not, but what I'm saying is not a new concept, and you can see all of that portrayed in the Iliad and the Homer. You can go read those poems and sonnets and look into all of the history and research that we have into the Greek pantheon and what was actually going on in Greece at the time back in the day. It's not a new concept, right? And so that's what we're engaged in right now. That's why people like Candace Owens are saying, oh, we're in spiritual warfare. That's why a lot of people who are extremely spiritual have been saying, The next World War III, the new World War, is not going to be necessarily a physical one, though we're seeing a lot of those effects actually take place on Earth, and it's very disturbing to see how much pain and suffering is going on in the world right now as I'm filming this video. That's a part of it, but the other part of it is the mass attack on the public psyche. Why is it that we're taught to behave a certain way in capitalism? Why do they want you to work until death so that you never question anything? A lot of people from the old world had much more free time, and they were much more in nature, and they were accessing their gifts, and they were seeing things for what it was. That's why you have so many ancient civilizations so tied into religion, and why we have such a rise and an uptick for all of those non-believers still watching this. Most of science, and I'm so sorry to be the one to say this and break it to you, the reason why you can't explain certain things with science, the reason why certain discoveries don't make sense, is because everything is spiritual at the end of the day, and science was just man's way of reclaiming in their own way the spiritual knowledge that came from a lot of matriarchs and rebranding it into something that they could claim and make sense of. A lot of older civilizations are much more spiritual and go based off of spiritually based facts, because that's the only real way you can describe certain things, you can explain certain things, and it makes sense to the human mind. And science is trying to catch up, essentially. Quantum physics is a very new concept for science to explain the unexplainable, or the inexplicable. There we go, my grammar. But at the end of the day, the gaps of what you find is all going to be spiritually based. I reference a lot of quantum physics in my work because I myself am a very rational person, and I like to see all perspectives of things. I welcome all perspectives of things. I do actually like science quite a bit, but all of the bits and pieces that we do have through quantum physics, all of the little gaps and the holes will start to be filled in when you start plugging in spiritual knowledge, which is what I do when I teach to people. Everything is so interconnected on a level that it's hard for the common human mind to understand. It's hard for those who are spiritually tapped in, who get these downloads, to come to terms with, because when you sit there and think about, oh, these people are not facing any consequences because of a spiritually based reason, what do you do then? What do you do then? And that is something I'm still trying to find the answer for. So if you feel overwhelmed and a lot of grief, angry, that is normal. That's fine. That's fine. That's very normal. It's very healthy to experience that type of an outrage to what is going on and not understanding why isn't anybody really going behind bars, or why doesn't this really stop. And I will have to unfortunately explain the real reason, because when you start to look through the Epstein files and when you start to piece everything together and you're asking, oh, wasn't this just, a very gross way for these billionaires, these people in power, to get off? Isn't this just a weird way for them having fun? And I am here to say no, it is not. It is a much deeper, much darker reason as to why all of this is going on. And if what I'm about to say makes sense, I hope this can give you some type of comfort, some type of closure in this, because I don't think there is any for the victims. Most certainly not for the victims. I wish all of them so much justice, for their families, for everybody that this has impacted. This is a very difficult thing, because even as a psychic medium, I don't know how this is going to play out. I've been predicting a lot of things in regards to world politics and what happens once all of this information really does come to light. And the best outcome, the best reality to go into, to shift into, is these systems collapsing and we rebuild and we all demand better, because this is not okay. So the real reason why there was all of this really terrible things going on to children and everything else that has been portrayed in the Epstein files, and why there was a literal team put together to get rid of Pope Francis, may that man rest in so much peace. May Francis know so much peace in his soul, because he did such good things during his time as the Pope. Why they put a team against that man, why there is a big, heavy anti-Catholic agenda is because, like I said earlier, with the fall of these ancient Mesopotamian regions, with the fall of these religions that nobody's praying to anymore, these gods, these old ancient beings still want power. They still want to be known. And what can they do? Like I said earlier, they can make deals with human beings to hop in their body and be down here on earth. And the next best thing for them is that if they're not receiving any spiritual energy or power to live good lives over on the other side in the astral, if they don't have power to do anything in the astral and they become much weaker as divine beings, what they can do is come down here on earth, have the body of a human being, and live as a king or a queen down here on earth. But what does that require? It requires quite a bit of energy. If you think about, in the context of Catholicism, Christianity, how many people pray to God and Jesus on a daily basis, right? There's a lot of Christians, a lot of Catholics in the world. If you think as each prayer, each person believing as giving energy to Christianity as a whole, giving power to the Christian God to perform miracles and do godly abilities and things, that makes it very easy for him to be everywhere at once, to split his consciousness and do a bunch of different things. When you start getting into collective consciousness clouds of divine energy, what is making and sourcing up different concepts, the planets, the cosmos overall, what is fueling all of that, right? When you have these divine beings that they're like, oh, I need an energy source, what are they going to do? They're going to harvest it from people. They're going to harvest it directly and voluntarily, because when you as a human being believe in a higher power, you're praying, you're giving your energy to them, you're giving offerings and whatnot. For those of you who are very spiritually based and in tune with deity work, you're giving a deity an offering, giving them your energy, giving them energy through an offering too. That's fueling them and feeding them, and you're doing that very voluntarily. However, a deity, a divine being, something from the other side can always steal energy from you involuntarily. That's why we have concepts like energy vampires, vampirism, parasites, demonic entities, succubus, succuba, that can steal your energy in a very harmful way, right? We have that concept. And unfortunately, the energy centers for a human being, if you know anything about energy bodies, meridians, chi, Reiki, if you know anything about that, your energy centers, everybody has a root chakra, where basically it's the mitochondria of the spiritual energy body. That's where everything is living, down there, right? And that's why when people start to talk about intercourse or sleeping with another person, intimacy, why you can create blood ties, or you can have a lot of different things that are very attaching you to another person, why somebody would get their cords cut, do a cord cutting with an ex-partner, an ex-lover, things of that nature. So you're being accessed very directly, energetically, through your reproductive organs, any male, female, anybody, it's down there in your reproductive organs. And so what will happen is very, very heinous things being done through intercourse. And I've spoken about this very greatly about Diddy. I have like posts and videos about Diddy, and because he's a prime example, unfortunately, of harvesting energy through these massive parties and these actions that are requiring intercourse with many people, multiple people all at once. And when you think about an island where all they did was do that to children, and the reason why is it children, because children are very weak and vulnerable, as we can see, as horrifically as that is, and it's easier to do very bad things to somebody very small and vulnerable, very, very tragically, very unfortunately. And if you really get into the files, which I don't really recommend doing for your own mental health, because what you will read about, what you will see is inhumane. And it is inhumane because the beings committing these acts are not human beings. They don't have the same concept of morality that you and me do. They don't have the human concepts of good and bad. That's all a human-made thing. It's just a human-made thing to them. It's just, oh, if I get my fix, I get my energy battery up to power up my spiritual abilities, to allow me to sway the law in my favor, to allow me to cast spells and magic and do everything spiritually based, to evade things. These are in fact mass rituals that are fueling the energy for the spell work and the energy work necessary to keep these people in power, to keep these people out of prison and jail, to keep these people running and controlling things, to also put mass spell work, or invest in massive things that are disenfranchising multiple groups of people. Why is there such a huge rise of AI and technology very recently in the past 20 years? Why is there so many people that are having so many mental illnesses, that the food is not good? Everything is meant to keep you asleep and not awake, not aware of what is happening on a mass level across the globe at this point. And so unfortunately, what was happening on that island was mass energy harvesting over and over again for all of these people who are in power. It's no coincidence that is the top elite people that are in the files and getting named right now, because why are they in power at the end of the day? Those are all human beings. If you look at it from a very, very rational perspective, those are all human beings. Why is so-and-so better than you? Because they have more money than you. You bleed the same way I bleed, right? And so you have to start thinking about it from that way. They're not more lucky because they have money and fame. They're not getting away with it because they have money or influence or power, because we've seen quite a few empires fall, people be overthrown, things turning around quite quickly for people who have money, fame, and power. The reason why nothing is happening so far is due to spiritual reasons, because this is a spiritual war. This is very, very much a spiritual war. And Catholics are onto that. Pope Francis was onto that. People who are Christian, believe in the Christian God, or practice certain spiritual practices are onto this, and they want this to stop. They want this to stop because it's heinous. It's gross. Very, very heinous. Very, very gross. And so that is what was happening on that island, and it happens much more commonly than you think. I did an entire video, a very big post as well on my Patreon, about Astroworld, and the video I'm talking about is over on my TikTok if you want to go look at it. I have a whole playlist about this stuff. But Astroworld, why did people pass away at a concert, and Travis Scott is still so popular? So popular, and Astroworld was such a horrific tragedy. And as an event planner, as somebody who works corporately as an event planner, I can tell 1,000% reading the entire Astroworld case from a professional in the industry that the event should have never happened. That was all deliberate, allegedly deliberate, from my professional experience, allegedly deliberate for all of that ensued. And so my heart goes out to those victims. But the spiritual reason for why that all happened in the video, in the post, but that's essentially what's going on here with Epstein. And that's not the only island. There's other islands. This is still happening, tragically. But the more that people wake up to this, the more that people reject this, the more that people say, no, we're not going to allow this, is what actually starts to put an end to this, because these are systems built upon this, on the backs of this. If you want to get very, very religious for a quick second, very spiritual, very woo-woo for a second, one of the real reasons why Jesus Christ became a Messiah and came down and passed on a cross, it was not just for humans, and it's not for absolving the sins of humans in the eyes of God. It's also to put an end to all of that. Because what happened after Christ passed away, and why do we label it as BC and AD, before Christ, after death, for the religious people who refer to that? Why was his coming so potent and so important? Because him coming put pretty much an end to the old world and a lot of those old religions and pantheons that were treating human life like a joke. Why did you have Moses in Egypt? Why was that a thing? Why do we have those stories? Why do we have the Bible talking about God punishing and removing cities like Sodom and Gomorrah? Why do we have all of that? Because from a very spiritual perspective, all of that needed to go. It all needed to go because it was disgusting. It was the fall of something very, very disturbing, because all of this has been going on for such a long time. And what we are seeing now is the rise of all of those old prophecies about another Messiah coming, about things falling apart, about a return to Christianity as a whole, to the Christian God, is because history is repeating itself and we're seeing the collapse. Because if you talk about universal laws and you really believe in that, when you get into quantum physics and more of a scientific basis of things, we have the law of polarity. When there is too much of something, the scales must balance and the opposite must also come into effect. There has been so much pain, so much suffering, that we are finally now ushering in a new world, a new time, where this doesn't exist anymore. This isn't what's ruling our societies. And if you want to talk about things from an astrological perspective, people have been saying very heavily, that it is going to be the fall of the American Empire, the United States American Empire as we know it, because the empire is about 250 years old, and that's how long it takes, typically, historically speaking, for an empire to fall. Things need to fall and be restructured, and it's being spoken about in every way, shape, or form, factually, politically, spiritually, however you want to slice that pie. That's how it's coming out. And so I hope that this video could give you a little bit more perspective as to what is going on and why it's going to be very dicey to actually see truth and justice come out from this. This is going to result in a lot of spiritual, religious, political warfare, and how the different Abrahamic religions, how world powers are using certain religions as a basis to do things, why certain agendas are getting pushed, and why a lot of these people are very, very deeply religious or spiritual in one way, shape, or form, and why we're seeing a big reform and a lot of pushback against certain religions or certain spiritual practices. All of it is tying back at the end of the day to spirituality. That is the center of this puzzle. That is the center of everything right now. So I invite you, I implore you to look further. If you want to know more about this, you can check out my Patreon. If you need a reading for anything, you feel resonating with my energy and things like that, you can get a reading with me. As you can see from the back, I sell spell oils, spelled products. I sell custom spells. I'm a witch. You can check out everything about me and see what I'm about. All my info is in my bio. But if you have any questions, let me know. And if you are very skeptical and you watch this whole thing and you think that I'm full of baloney, you can also let me know in a respectful way. I invite people of all paths of life to comment on what I'm talking about. Does this interest you? Do you believe in any of this? Why do you not believe in any of this? Or why do you believe? Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you for staying until the end. I hope you have a great rest of your day whenever you're seeing this.